understood the importance of patent protection to the economy and growth of our newborn nation. They guaranteed this protection in our Constitution, and then at the earliest time in 1790, the first patent law was passed. The task before us today isn't an easy one. Patent eligibility is a multi-layered legal issue with detailed tests and case-by-case rules created by the Supreme Court. This law must be culled and gleaned from many pages of the court's nuanced opinions. Next, we tie in science. All scientists, from genes to machines to artificial intelligence. Then we mix in insatiable human curiosity and boundless creativity. We begin to understand why this area of the law is so challenging and so relevant this very day. It is rules trying to keep up with scientific development and human imagination. There's much debate about how to deal with this complex patent issue. Senator Tillis has done excellent and diligent work, including holding multiple hearings in the Intellectual Property Subcommittee, and I believe this is the first hearing we're holding on legislation at the full committee level. We may or may not agree on this bill entitled Patent Eligibility Restoration Act. I don't yet know. Most of us are still studying and trying to understand the bill and the effects it'll have in order to determine what's the best path forward. That's why we're here today, to study and understand this important issue that has had tremendous impact on the well-being of humanity and the success of our economy. We have 4 experts joining us today. Thank you for being here, and others who are submitting written testimony for the record to help us understand this with insights and experience. The stakes couldn't be higher. Our country's leads the world in cutting-edge inventions and technology. This momentum fuels our economy and advances our society. It cures diseases and helps us grow enough food to feed people throughout the world. We have a responsibility to Americans to hold this lead and to the world to fulfill our potentials. The question we ask today is how we do maintain this momentum, and while also making sure that all Americans can benefit from these advances. Learning how to strike this balance is why we're holding the hearing today. We'll have a fascinating discussion. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I know this is a meeting of the Senate Judiciary Committee, but something's missing. Lindsey Graham's missing. After all these years of working together with him, his absence is felt personally by so many of us. For 4 years, I chaired this committee. He sat next to me. We were adversaries on many issues and many nominees. You would never have known it if you'd seen us outside this chamber, because we were trusted friends of one another. His word was good. When he told me he'd do something, he did it. And I tried to keep that same feeling of trust with dealing with him. He ended up voting for 75% of the Biden judicial nominees, 75%. Wasn't easy, but he said from the beginning, I think Republicans have to vote for Democrats and Democrats have to vote for Republicans. That's the way it's always been. I've tried to live at that standard ever since. He was part of something called the Gang of Eight, which is really unique in the history of the Senate. There were literally 4 Democratic senators, myself included, 4 Republican senators, including John McCain and Lindsey, who sat down to rewrite the immigration laws of America, and that's long overdue. Well, we spent months at it. Every night after the session, sitting down and going through another section. We finally put it together on a bipartisan basis. Lindsey was a critical element of it, a critical part of that, as were many of the members of my colleagues. And we put it to the floor. Business supported it, labor supported it, the groups across the board supported it. It was thoughtful, it was balanced, it was a remarkable achievement on a bipartisan basis. It passed in the Senate with an overwhelming vote, but unfortunately was killed in the House of Representatives. Lindsey was part of that gang of 8. Lindsey was part of every gang. He couldn't be kept away. And he was invited in because he was always trying to find that bipartisan position that resulted in a new law, a new idea, a new solution. It was very important to him. Over 20 years ago, I introduced in this committee a bill called the DREAM Act. The DREAM Act said if you came to this country, if your mother and father brought you here as a kid, you ought to have a chance to work your way to legal status and citizenship in this country. I introduced it over 20 years ago. It's passed on the Senate floor once in a while, on the House floor once in a while, never in both chambers. Each year, I would introduce the bill. I would look for a Republican co-sponsor. In the beginning, it was a lot easier. Then it became harder and harder. Eventually, the one person I could count on to be my bipartisan co-sponsor was Lindsey Graham. And he did it at political peril. It wasn't a very popular position among some very conservative Republicans. But he did it for me, he did it for those kids, and I'll never forget that he was there when we needed him. Last week, we were in Turkey at the NATO summit. Chris Coons and I and several members came together. We arrived to find, of course, Lindsey Graham, who got there before us, was working every crowd in every room. You'd think he was running for office. He had some ideas on how to end the war in Ukraine, and he wanted to share them with everybody there. Through the course of the week, we met with President Zelensky and many other leaders on a bipartisan basis. Each one of them greeted Lindsey by first name. Lindsey, it's great to see you. It just shows you his reach of influence and his involvement in the key issues, including war and peace of his day. I'm sorry to say that Wednesday was the last time I saw him. I think the same for Senator Coons last Wednesday. And then the terrible news came through on Sunday morning. I'm going to miss this man. He was an important part of the Senate, an important part of American government. He reached way beyond any definition of the job of senator. He was really a person you could trust on a personal basis. You could confide in it as he confided in you. I'm happy that his sister is going to take his place for the remainder of this year. He loved her. And when his parents passed away, he became legal guardian of his 13-year-old sister.